Hi guys and welcome to a special episode of Beat to the Punch. I'm joined on the line with Riku. Riku, how's Berlin? All the way from Berlin you're joining us. How's things?
Yeah, I'm in Berlin. I got an early flight at 6 a.m. or something, 6:40 a.m. here, so I'm a bit tired, but I've had a few drinks, so I'll probably talk my opinion more than ever.
Are you
Uh,
are you over there for work or leisure?
it just work. Just
Work.
I'm here today, and then tomorrow afternoon I fly back.
Yeah, some town anyway. Berlin's some town.
It is a good town. I mean, who knows? I might end up after this in some sort of weird Berlin club. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, but obviously we've put on the special pod tonight. It wasn't supposed to be a pod this week, but after such a massive weekend, one of the biggest upsets in memory in my lifetime anyway. Um, Andy Ruiz pulled it off against Anthony Joshua. It was a fantastic moment for the sport. It might have been something that the heavyweight division just needed. Did you see the fight? Obviously, you've seen the fight. Every boxing fan's seen the fight by now. Yeah,
Everybody's seen the fight
yeah.
probably a few times.
Just what did you think about? Look, let's start on a positive note. Just what did you think about Andy Ruiz's performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to take away and focus on sort of what Joshua did wrong and what didn't work. But I think, Andy Ruiz Jr., he did have a lot of advantages. I said last week that he has no chance like everybody else. And he had a 20 centimeter reach disadvantage. He didn't look the part, but my God, he used every advantage he had. And what I was really impressed with was his speed. I mean, we all knew that he was a quick puncher, but he was punching as Joshua punched, uh, and he was beating him to the punches. And also the fact that a small guy like that, that's 6 foot, is able to make a big guy like Joshua dance around the ring and expend energy. So his ring generalship was just really, really good. I mean, so we start off with the positives, which is his ability to control the ring and actually just to be a very good boxer. Like his punch selection was good. He was combination punching. He did everything that the likes of Takam and Joe Parker couldn't do against Joshua's smaller men.
Yeah, I mean, even when, as you said, I did notice that. When he went in, he took the centre of the ring, and I was really surprised with how AJ gave him the centre of the ring. But Andy Ruiz, he took the centre of the ring. He didn't panic. He knew exactly what he was there to do when he got in there. He obviously had the game plan, and he executed it to perfection. But I mean, I think me and Nathan were saying on the pod that Andy Ruiz will take rounds off Joshua and he will cause him some problems, but eventually AJ will just he'll be too big for him and he'll just beat him down. Obviously that didn't happen, but I mean, you were speaking about Anthony Joshua's 20 centimetre reach. He's got that. Just keep him at the end of the jab, but. Out of the two of them, you would have to say the guy with the more effective jab was Andy Ruiz, who just aimed it straight for the centre Anthony Joshua's chest, which was roundabout, which was straight for him, rather than punch up the way. He punched straight into roundabout Anthony Joshua's chest, throat area. And, you could actually, as the rounds were going on, you could see when AJ was feeling the pace. I mean, that was a great weapon to have because it just was interrupting his breathing. And as you said, Joshua was moving round the outside and, exerting energy all the time. But at what point do you think that Anthony Joshua? How long do you think that fight could have went on before Anthony Joshua realised he can't fight on the outside? He's too big, and he's just not got a gas tank for it.
I don't know. It was a really weird one because aside from the performance and all the things on the list, which I think Joshua did do particularly right in the fight, it didn't seem like he was listening to Rob McCracken. So when he was in the corner, Rob McCracken was saying double jab him, don't get caught in exchanges, keep it at the range. And then what happens is Joshua just comes out steaming, and tries to do his own thing. So I think there was and Joshua just seemed bewildered in the corner, like he wasn't listening. He was talking back at his trainer, which you don't often see at that level. And usually Joshua's, a decent listener. He can execute a game plan. I mean, against Parker, that was sort of things that he got a lot of credit for. By this fight, I think I don't really know what's happened, But it just seemed like him and Rob McCracken had different ideas on what they need to do, and Joshua sort of did his own thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you've definitely got a point there because I mean, he kept asking him questions, and they're unusually you don't see fighters at that level. They're just concentrating on their breathing and taking instructions on. You don't answer back. You don't argue. You know, but we're seeing both of that for AJ, and then he was just asking after he'd been knocked down in the third. I think it was at the fourth. He kept asking, "What punch was it that put him down?" You know,
Yeah,
he kept asking that. You go, oh, don't worry, it's already happened. You know, Rob McCracken's telling you the adjustments to make. If you go out and listen to him, then, you know, that should keep you at harm's way. Don't worry about what's already happened. But Anthony Joshua, he seemed nervous. He didn't seem to be totally there. And, you know, I mean, we're going to hear the stories that are starting to leak out, but as we were speaking about off air, everything's a bit too convenient to put it down to that. I think that Anthony Joshua was in there with a seasoned fighter and he realised he might just not have the hunger for it anymore. What do you think about
he
that?
was there. He was there with a better boxer. I mean, look, he was doing basic mistakes. Like now, I'll probably move on to what Joshua did wrong. So he was hooking with a hooker, which is the thing that everybody in boxing knows you just don't do. You don't hook with a hooker. And Andy Ruiz was punching as Joshua was punching, and he just beat him to the punch. And he was getting hit by that left hook all day. Also, the issues that Joshua hasn't been able to correct over the last few years. He has no head movement still. He wasn't able to feint. So, and his jab, which is usually a good kind of ramrod type jab, it was just quite a lackluster. He was sort of pushing it out there, but he wasn't even having any thorough there. So it wasn't keeping Ruiz off him. So I think I don't know what the game plan was because I don't think that would have been the game plan to move around. Because why would he move around against a guy that's very heavy and short? Because you're giving away all of your advantages and expanding your own energy. But it just seemed like all the basic fundamental things that Joshua doesn't do well, he gave those advantages that he does do well to Andy Ruiz Jr. So, I mean, questions must be asked about what happened in this camp. I'm not talking about the sparring, the sparring rumors. I'm talking about actually what was the game plan they were practicing on? What were they actually trying to do? What were the tactics going into the fight? And also, how has he improved since the fight against the likes of Parker, Takam, and even Vlad Klitschko?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, but at the end of the first round, you know, a first round which I gave to Ruiz. Ruiz looked, as I say, Ruiz went out there and he didn't look as if he was phased by anything. You know, there was this giant standing in front of him, and Ruiz was in there and he was cool, and he was calm and he knew what he was going to do. Anthony Joshua, on the other hand, was like the complete opposite. He was moving round the ring, and I was seeing him. He was trying to stay up on his toes, and you're saying, I'm sitting thinking to myself, you're 17 stone, 18 stone. You can't be up on your toes. You know, there's like one guy in the full division that can do it. That's how rare it is. That's not your
Yeah,
game. When he went back at the end of that round, he went back to his corner. He was breathing very heavily for a round in which nothing really happened, and he didn't throw a lot of punches, and neither guy really threw a lot of punches. But Anthony Joshua was breathing very heavily, and that was at the end of a 3 minute round.
yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, there were so many things about that fight that were bizarre, but I think Wilder did an interview with some US channel. I can't remember his name after the fight, and he made a good point that when you are sort of when you're a pretty robotic and predictable fighter, being a counter puncher is the worst antidote to that. And Ruiz was counter punching really well because everything Joshua was doing was so predictable. So even when he was throwing punches, he was throwing 1-2s, single shots. He wasn't really, putting combinations like he usually does. He wasn't backing the guy onto the ropes. Um, yeah, it was just a very bizarre fight in terms of Joshua's performance and how lackluster he was. But one thing I want to ask you is that how much do you think it weighed on him to, have this fight for DAZN, sell this fight, do the documentaries of Meek Millie, have a 30-man entourage with him in Miami, entertain all the boys in the US, all the demands that go into being in another territory and having to market yourself in the US.
Yeah, well, do you know what actually came to my mind when I was watching them in them early rounds was I remember I was sparring with my big friend Stephen Jameson, shout out to him, who was like ranked number 2 heavyweight in the amateurs in Scotland. And I remember
Who
I
won that
was
sparring session?
yeah, that didn't go too well for me. Considering he pretty much threw 3 punches around and he let everyone I remember, But I remember it, and after about 30, 45 seconds, I was breathing very heavily. I was in a bit of a state. And he says to me, and yet he was in there. See, by the end of the session, he wasn't even breaking a sweat, and he was saying to me, "It's nerves, it's nervous energy. That's why he's like, you need to calm yourself down. He's like, because your nerves affect your breathing. It affects, it just burns so much energy to be nervous. That came to my mind when I was watching Anthony Joshua the other night there. He looked as if, there's no excuse for a man that's in his shape. I'm not talking about his physical shape, but I mean, Anthony Joshua is like he's a professional.
Athlete, he's a
Yeah,
prime
he is a
athlete.
proper athlete. I mean, after 3 minutes, I just dancing on his toes, he was out of breath. You've got to kind of put that down to some nerves, There was nothing landed on him. He didn't overexert himself. So you're sitting thinking to yourself, what is it that's got to you? And then when we had that great third round, and he kind of thought he had Ruiz finished, and I think he threw everything at him, and it backfired. But Anthony
Yes,
Joshua never recovered. And you're talking about the fight finished 4 rounds later. Anthony Joshua never, he never got his breath back. He never got a second wind. He was spent. He was a spent force. So
yeah, and it wasn't sort of a a Fury type knockdown where you get flattened out clean. It was like an exchange of punches. He got hit around the temple and scrambled a bit, but it wasn't the most brutal of knockdowns I've seen where people are trying to get up. So it was one of those where I hate to say this, but you question his heart at this point.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, just take it back to that DAZN thing. I mean, I didn't actually really answer it. I just gave you the build up to the answer. Yeah, I would say that looks as if it's taken a mental effect on him. I would say all that. Maybe, and going on to the heart question, I think that Andy Ruiz kind of beat the fight out of him in that fight. And I mean, when that fight was stopped, Anthony Joshua didn't want to fight anymore. I mean, I don't care what his lips were saying, his body language was saying something totally different. Their ropes were holding him up. He's supposed to be letting the referee know that he's fit to continue in there and that, he can protect himself. He was sitting with his arms on the ropes and, leaning his full body weight against him. The referee done the right thing, just making the decision for him to stop it, because the referee's just saying, do you know what? Your heart's not in this. You could get seriously hurted here.
And
And
spitting his gum shields out.
yeah, spat his gum shield out. He'd already looked out and said something to Rob McCratting as well. There was just so many. I think that could be what defines this fight as going forward. It's no like, will Anthony Joshua come in better shape, or will Anthony Joshua do this or that. People know now that he's kind of weak behind the chest. People know that he's got a weak heart now, and for that in boxing that takes away your fear.
And
The
your
aura and
aura
it's
of
round.
invincibility.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody will now think that they've got a chance against Anthony
Yeah,
Joshua, because if you can just stay in there with him,
it's funny because I was speaking with Terry this morning about it, and from New Age Boxing Podcast, and he was of the view that actually someone like Big Baby Miller will be thinking that it's a missed opportunity because he's a bigger guy, he's a volume puncher, regardless of what he takes. A big guy like that, and he could probably take the punishment to keep on coming. And I think that's sort of the antidote of against Joshua. And I would now actually fancy someone like Dillian White against him, just because Dillian White has heart, and Dillian White will keep coming. If Dillian White can hurt him in the body a few times and hit him, scramble him and hit him a few times, so I'm not sure whether Joshua will want to fight against him.
I was talking about this today with somebody at work, and we were saying, has Anthony Joshua ever been the same since the Klitschko fight? Do you? Do,
No.
I don't think so
Well,
either. I think going into that, he was a bit of a killer, and I think he's progressively. I don't know if it's because he's begetting like you know, silk pajama syndrome. He's losing his hunger, or if in that fight, it took that much out of him that it's kind of left him a wee bit battle scarred, a wee bit shell shocked, maybe. You know what I mean?
yeah, I'm not sure whether it's that. I think it's maybe more the fact that we don't see Joshua training a lot in between training camps. He's out in Dubai, driving golf carts with orangutans. He's always somewhere hanging around with his mates. It's not like it's a bit like Amir Khan, what Virgil Hunter said, I think it's last week, that actually, a fighter needs to be training in between fights. Just because you're a heavyweight and you've got the physique of an Adonis doesn't mean that you shouldn't be improving in between fights. And when you're fighting twice a year, you're doing 3 months of training camp, fighting, then you have another 3 months. So you're having 6 months off in between, whereas others are improving throughout the year. So if you look at someone like Dillian White or these guys, even if they don't have fights scheduled, you just have to look at them on Instagram or Twitter, and they always training, they're always looking to improve. But I think since the Klitschko fight, maybe it hits the hunger, you just haven't seen the same thing. And also, it's easy to say these things in hindsight, but since the Klitschko fight, there hasn't really been a guy in front of him that should, in theory, would have given him problems. Like, we know how good Joseph Parker is. He's not Dillian White's level necessarily, and he fought the wrong fight. But we know that Takam is what he is based on performances after that, and so we had a guy that was in the shape of his life, came to fight, and wasn't willing to back down, and that sort of which we haven't seen since the Klitschko fight.
Do you know which was quite funny is we had Joseph Parker, and anybody that's seen Joseph Parker, especially when they fought like the likes of Andy Ruiz and that, he was known for being a quick-handed guy. He'd
Yeah,
fast hands, and when he was coming over for the Anthony Joshua fight, he made the mistake of trying to bulk up to fight
yeah,
Joshua at his own game, and I just think it's ironic that the Parker that we thought that we were going to get actually showed up in the figure of Andy Ruiz. That's the kind of guy that we thought, like a guy who was going to put 4 and 5 punch combinations together. All right, he's no landing them all, but he's at least. It kind of showed up how very poor Anthony Joshua's guard is. Because he blocked out the first punch, but the second and third punch get through. And Andy Ruiz was showing that up. He wasn't just throwing single shots like most people do. With AJ, Andy Ruiz was looking to get in and swing these hooks in and then punch down the middle. And Anthony Joshua just looked wide open. He didn't know where to put his hands. And I think that showed in the fight, especially in that third round, when you see both men how they react to getting knocked down. Andy Ruiz looks like a guy who's probably been fighting his full life. He's seen everything at
he has
amateur.
been. Yeah, he
Yeah,
has. He's got over 100 and something amateur fights. He's
yeah.
got a good
So
amateur record.
when you seen, Andy Ruiz says that's the first time he had ever been put in the canvas, right? But
Yeah,
but you watch Andy Ruiz because that punch that AJ puts him down with is probably the punch of the fight, probably the hardest punch of the fight. It's a beauty of a shot. Watch Andy Ruiz's eyes. Andy Ruiz's eyes are fixated on Anthony Joshua. He's no letting the room spin. He knows exactly where his opponent is, and he's still get his wits about him. He's still, he can go into like safety mode and defensive mode. He knows what he has to do to give himself the best chance of survival. Now you compare that with Anthony Joshua when he was hurt, and he's not got a poker face. Once he's hurt,
no.
everybody knows he's hurt. He looks like a giraffe on ice. He's stumbling, he's all over the place. He looks worried on his face, and it was just he just looked totally out his comfort zone, and he just didn't have the experience to deal with what was in front of him.
Well, that makes me question what are they doing in the gym, as in like what scenario practices are they doing? We've heard of trainers, training their fighters when they get knocked down. I was speaking to Gary Logan a while ago. who obviously used to work with David Hay and George Groves and Andy Lee. And, he was talking about the scenario training that he's been doing with fighters in case they get knocked down, what are you meant to do? How are you meant to act and stuff? Whereas that kind of stuff, it seemed like for Joshua, who is an accomplished amateur, but actually relative novice to boxing, it seems like all of that stuff has never been done before. So in the Klitschko fight, yeah, he got put down and he got hurt, but Klitschko was probably a bit too old and, fatigued to finish him. But he just wasn't very smart. He wasn't using his reach to tie up Andy Ruiz Jr. He was going into exchange with a guy. He wasn't fighting behind his jab. Whereas even compared to someone like Tyson Fury, when he got put down against Wilder in that kind of sensational knockdown, he fought very smart. He was dancing on the outside for a while, moving around, and then when he regained his kind of consciousness, he was behind his jab, and then he was exchanging when he knew that he could win the exchange. Whereas Joshua was giving away the distance and going to exchange close, I think in the hope of knocking Ruiz out and having a sensational victory.
Do we think that with the superstar that Anthony Joshua is, so we only see him twice a year, maybe only once a year we'll see him, that's going to be damaging Anthony Joshua? What you're picking up in one fight, surely to God, that's not still in your bank when you go to fight 9 months later.
It all depends on how much training you do in between that, right? As in, if you go off to Dubai for 3 months and you're hanging on the beach and being a professional Instagrammer, then you probably aren't learning. And also, I think going back to his setup, having the same sparring partners, doing it at EIS, not bringing in heavyweights that are actually going to give him huge amounts of problems, sparring with cruiserweight Okoli, a few other guys like Fraser Clark and allegedly now Agit Kabaye. The best heavyweights throughout history have always had good sparring partners, and that's part of it. So I think it's also the mentality of how much he wants to learn, and that the people around him, are they telling him that he's the greatest heavyweight in the world and he doesn't have to worry about anything, or are they actually pushing him to improve, which I'm not sure he surrounds himself with people that are doing that because everybody gets a paycheck off him. They should be bringing in different types of sparring partners, because for me, it seemed like the style that Andy Ruiz was fighting for, they had never seen anything like it and they weren't prepared for the style.
Yeah, definitely didn't look comfortable punching down the way. That looked, kind of from a little bit.
Or punching with somebody, hooking with a hooker, or just, somebody that gets in close and punches in combinations. He really didn't seem comfortable with that because I think he's used to relying on his speed, but actually we had a quicker guy here. So how do you negate that? Do you take the centre off the ring as we suggested and maybe use your jab? Although the jab was woeful in the last fight against Ruiz.
Yeah, I'm not bringing this into ring thing up again after this, right? But it was just so bizarre because Andy Ruiz, he's no body beautiful. And I've the only time I've seen Andy Ruiz fight before this was against Parker, and I thought he was superb, but his gas tank let out after 7 rounds, and that cost him that night. And Andy Ruiz, it was still Brendan Galloway swears that Andy Ruiz still won that fight. Now I think I
think a lot of people do. To be honest.
think I had Parker maybe just shading it. I think the scorecards were actually quite spot on. It wasn't like he was jobbed or that. It was one of them fights where it could have went either way. But why? I just don't understand the thinking of AG of giving Andy Ruiz the centre of the ring, because that lets Andy Ruiz dictate the pace and what this fight is going to be fought at. If he takes the centre of the ring, Andy Ruiz is the one that has to do all the moving round the outside. And then you let Andy Ruiz move for 6 or 7 rounds, and then you go and try and do your work. It just seemed everything about that fight was completely wrong. Everything about it was like they had just pulled a bodybuilder out of the street and said to go and fight him, You know, it was like one of the old circus things that used to do. You know, at the carnivals, can you come into the ring and beat this strong man? You know, and that's what it felt like. Like Anthony Joshua just looked as if he should not have been in the ring with Andy Ruiz. Now let that sink in. He should not have been in the ring with him. Everything was totally
No.
off.
And I think in the rematch, I mean, if Anthony Joshua is the same setup and everything remains the same, I'm probably going to have to favour. I'm going to have to favour Andy Ruiz because I can't see there being anything that AJ can change enough to actually, to win this fight if he fights with the same game plan and has a similar camp and everything else. So I'd probably just favour Andy Ruiz, to be honest, in the rematch. But let's not forget, I mean, AJ is still a very good level heavyweight, and that was a horrible performance by him. But even to his standards, I mean, we've seen Tyson Fury have some shocking performances, and he's not the type of guy that, has the power to get out of these situations like Wilder, who's had shocking performances himself, but actually has one fight just because he's knocked the guy out pretty late in the fight. But I think with AJ, that performance was poor, but what worries me is the fundamentals of that performance. So, ring generalship, not moving your head, not fainting, poor punch selection. That's not something you can fix in one camp. And
Yeah, but
that's kind of the worry about it.
that's it. I mean, how long? I mean, it wasn't just one thing you have to brush up on. It's so broad. The mistakes that were being made in there and the things that were showing up in Anthony Joshua, as you say, that's not something that can be fixed in one camp. That's something that has to be fixed over time and seeing different kinds of opponents and fighting regularly. Now, that's not going to happen. And the next time we see Andy Ruiz fighting AJ, I asked this on Twitter. Now, everybody knows the bookies will make AJ a favourite, but the smart money has to go on Andy Ruiz because this wasn't like Lennox Lewis and Rackman, where Rackman just caught him with this beautiful shot and it was lights out. This was a systematic breakdown. Andy Ruiz got AJ into deep water and then he started to drown him in it. It was, as I said, he took his heart, he broke his heart. Anthony Joshua lost his will to fight in there. But
yeah, and also, Andy Ruiz, I mean, we need to see now that he has the belt and he has the $5 million in his bank accounts and he'll go another 10 million coming probably at least from the rematch. So we have to see how he lives life because we've seen many times, like with Hasim Rahman, for example, where, when you hit the pinnacle of the sports, are you actually, are you motivated to get out of bed? I mean, Joshua did it a number of times defending his title, which is amicable, but whereas with Ruiz, we don't really know. He seems like a pretty humble guy and stuff, but how hard will he train for a rematch and everything else? And again, I'm not convinced the rematch is even going to happen because I don't know whether Team Joshua want the rematch, for one. And also, I think Ruiz is going to be pushing on terms to, already there's been talk about it happening in the US, either in Las Vegas or, the Staples Center. And he's a PBC fighter at the end of the day. So it wouldn't be surprising if he, vacated some of the belts or, they just screwed over Joshua by not giving a rematch and vacating it and letting everybody else fight for vacant belts and scattering the belts everywhere.
Well, I was also thinking that, I mean, Hearn and AJ are saying that they're bringing it back to the UK. I don't think the DAZN would be very happy with that. They've fronted the money to get this fight. This fight is first DAZN. DAZN's one big here because everybody's watching these clips and everybody is trying to find these clips on Twitter. And DAZN's like little videos and Anthony Joshua getting floored 4 times. It couldn't be any better PR for DAZN in that sense. It was a bit of a shambolic result because it's the star that they wanted to bring in, but as it goes, getting their name out there, everybody is seeing DAZN, like signs of DAZN everywhere now.
Well, Wilder said today that he's not tied to any TV network. Joshua's not tied to DAZN either. So I don't think DAZN would mind bringing in Wilder against Ruiz Jr. for big money on the platform for unification fights. And I'm sure there's a way, if anybody knows it's Al Heyman, how to get away from these mandatory clauses or, not make the fight happen or something that will enable this fight not to take place. So don't be surprised if you see, this fight never happening and Wilder unifying but Andy Ruiz Jr. and then taking the fight, taking his belts away to Showtime or, making a deal himself with the zone. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. But the thing with this fight is it's, this result has really blew the landscape wide open. We went into this. I went into the fight with so much pessimism, and I was so downbeat on the full heavyweight division. If you could have seen me in my house at 4:30 on Sunday morning, and you could have seen the excitement and the buzz, and I was just so happy, and it's this little chunky Mexican guy who's just come in and just threw everything, just blew everything out the water. All this haggling for money, all this over marinating fights, and he's just come in there and he's cost your Eddie Hearns and your Al Haymans and whoever else is to blame for fights not getting made. He's just cost him all, 50, 60, $70 million each, coming in here and just upsetting it. And I loved that. I absolutely loved that. But
were you wearing, what pajamas were you wearing while you were celebrating?
what pajamas was I wearing? I think I had my Golf GTI pajamas on. And I actually went down at 5 o'clock in the morning and got myself a Corona. I hadn't been drinking, but I got myself a Corona and just had it for Andy Ruiz,
And a Snickers bar.
But just how does the heavyweight landscape look now? Just where is Joshua? And like, we would call them the big three, but is it a big four now?
Maybe more because from what I understand, mandatory supersede rematch clauses. So it's very likely that Dillian White can put a mandatory on Andy Ruiz Jr. For the WBO, which would then supersede, that would supersede a rematch clause. Now there's a lot of players because we effectively have PBC has all the heavyweight belts, but there's a lot of fighters. So if Tyson Fury's willing to fight against Wilder again, as it seems, and there's the Ortiz fight, there's just so many possibilities. So it's just wide open again. Although there's PBC has all the belts, but it's now up to PBC how they want to play. And what it mainly means is it's detrimental for Joshua because it could be that he just has to work his way back to a mandatory if a rematch doesn't happen.
Yeah, but do you think that somebody with a star, Anthony Joshua, has got that in him to work his way back up and be the B-side, work himself into a 75-25 split? Do you think that Anthony Joshua could swallow his pride and do that? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think he'd have to if he wants to continue in boxing. And it's you don't want to be writing the guy off and saying this is the end of his career or he's washed up or done, as I've seen a lot of people do, which I think is unfair because apart from Rocky Marciano, all the heavyweights have lost, not necessarily in the same manner, but it happened. It's boxing. But I think this might be the thing which makes him look at his setup. Look at the 30-man entourage around him, question, how much hunger he has in boxing. And as many people have stated, he looked quite, I wouldn't say relieved because I think he looked more bewildered or concussed at the end of the fight. But maybe this is the thing where he thinks, actually, I can be myself again and I don't need to be this marketing machine. I don't need to carry the weight of Matchroom and DAZN on my shoulders. I'm finally free. So maybe this is the thing that gets him back into, doing boxing because he loves it rather than because of all the politics involved and, being Mr. PC and stuff like that.
Yeah, just touching on the criticism it's been aimed towards Anthony Joshua. We can criticise his performance, but we can't criticise Anthony Joshua off the back of one fight. we want people to go in there and beat guys like Anthony Joshua. That's the way we want boxing to be. We don't want them to get steamrolled. Let's be honest, this is what we want, is things like this happening.
Well, that's what
Underdogs
we
getting in
crave
and
in the
winning.
UFC, right? That's what we say happens in the UFC all the time.
Yeah. So I mean, it's that thing. People are just I actually think that Anthony Joshua is getting a lot of the backlash and ill feeling for fans towards Eddie Hearn, and because he's a cash cow, then he's taking the flak for it. But what you were saying there about Anthony Joshua being relieved now, that actually came. Eddie Hearn says that after the fight. That he was relieved that the pressure was starting to get to him, the stress of having all them belts.
Yeah, but Eddie Hearn says whatever suits him at that point. I mean, he seemed quite happy to chuck Joshua under the bus after the fight, and only last week he was saying, he's a mate more than he is actually one of my fighters. So whatever comes out of Eddie Hearn's mouth must be questioned. But I don't think he's necessarily relieved, but I think he knows this is an inflection point for his career, and sort of now he can kind of take ownership of, what he wants to do and how he wants to run things, because we see it in boxing all the time, whether it be Manny Pacquiao or, anybody else. It's happened numerous times where a fighter loses and that makes them question everything, because why change a winning formula? All the guys like Freddie Cunningham and all these others are eating off him. Yeah, they've made him great commercial and they made him a lot of money, but who's actually advising him on the boxing side of things? Who has his best interest? Rob McCracken has one foot in Camp GB, at the EIS. Does he need a trainer that's there with him all the time, making sure he's doing the right things, making sure he's training when he's not, but like Ben Davidson is with Tyson Fury. Does he need someone like that? Does he just need to move abroad, live in the shadows for a bit, do his training up somewhere? I'm not saying Big Bear, but, somewhere like Big Bear, and just train out there and kind of just concentrate on his boxing and, become a bit of a recluse, because this celebrity lifestyle and boxing, they just haven't worked for anyone throughout the history of the sport. Regardless of what you say about people like Floyd Mayweather or others, these are guys that, train their nuts off all the time. So, this is the moment where he has to take ownership of his career.
Yeah, Floyd is usually the exception in most rules in boxing. You know,
Yeah.
um,
But despite Floyd, despite him, taking photos of private jet and everything, he trained all the time. He was in shape all the time. He did his runs every day, but
yeah, and the thing
not
is
to
with
it.
Floyd Mayweather, I heard Vince Cummins saying this the other day, and it was absolutely spot on. That's Vince Cummins for the boxing rant. And Vince says is that the thing is with Floyd, why money didn't ruin Floyd is because Floyd he thought that there's a check for $500 million. He thought he was underpaid. he Floyd Mayweather always thought he should have been making, these astronomical amounts of money. So it was never like something new to him. He thought he'd been underpaid the rest of his career. So,
Yeah.
Floyd always, he knew, what he valued himself. But the thing with AJ is, I mean, I thought after the fight, this is how I left with the impression that, I don't know if the hunger is still there. I mean, it must be hard to take a punch for a 20 stone man when you're sitting there with, 60, 70, 80 million pounds in the bank. You've got to be some point when you say, do you know what? I don't need this.
Yeah, but Klitschko did it for years, and I think Klitschko got iced a few times, and he went and started training with Emmanuel Stewart, and then later on Jonathan Banks. Um, so it's happened in the heavyweight division numerous times where guys will change trainers when they lose, and they'll just they'll start again and they'll relocate somewhere and start a new lifestyle, because they realize, I think that was the point where Joshua realized that actually I can't do this sort of lifestyle of being a celebrity and a boxer, and also I need to take my boxing seriously 24/7, not just in camp.
Yeah, well, that was the thing with Klitschko. Klitschko was a 24/7 athlete who wasn't a celebrity. Maybe back home in Ukraine he was a celebrity, but one of the biggest criticisms of the Klitschkos was they were so boring.
Yeah, but in Germany, they were quite big news. They're quite a big deal here, and they had other interests. But what I mean is more just that sometimes you need to take yourself out of your comfort zone. So, training in the same place where you've been training since you were, in Team GB, having the same sparring partners, living in London, hanging out with skins, all that stuff. Does he need to move to the US and work with a US trainer and at least 6 7 months a year where he's not the guy that can't walk down the street where you get mobbed. Just have because he has to always be on. He has to always keep his persona. He has to always be in front of the camera. He has to be waving at people. He has to be at this event, that event, and that's the stuff that he was saying before the training camp that this is the best training camp he's ever had because, well,
Fighters never say
I'm
that.
not, yeah, but he was saying that partly because he just enjoys, being in the US where he isn't as well known and stuff like that. But maybe the problem was they brought an entourage of 30 people with him.
Yeah, and they were
But
also in a party
what
town of Miami.
Yeah, but that's taxing as well, isn't it? Having an entourage of 30 people. You rent in the house, people asking for tickets, people want pictures for their Instagram. You're
Yeah,
living in a house with 30 people. Does he need to go to lodge in the middle of nowhere and train up in the mountains?
yeah. But we've not got too much more to cover. So what I will say is we've already discussed Anthony Joshua, the major flaws that were shown up, and he's not going to have the time before the rematch to address all of them. So I'll put it to you first. What is the one thing that he's going to have to fix before he can think about beating Andy Ruiz?
I think they just have to have a clear game plan. They have to have a game plan and he has to stick to that game plan. Um, you know, we can all probably agree that that wasn't the best Joshua. He had no pop in his jab. I mean, the internet's full of reasons for all of these things. But regardless, he has to listen to his trainer and execute the game plan. And he has to be patient. Like, he can't expect to take this guy out in 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is. I mean, that was a major thing the other night. There was his game plan was either wrong or he just didn't have one. Because the way he was in there boxing is not the way Anthony Joshua should be boxing. But for me, I think that it's about time that we start addressing, why he's got such a poor gas tank. He's too big. Anthony Joshua has to come down in weight. He can't be carrying that amount of muscle about. It's taking too much oxygen away from other parts of his body to feed them muscles. That's why we don't see heavyweights with that kind of physique anymore. The reason they could date in the 90s was because most of them were doting.
Yeah.
Your
Uh,
Evander Holyfield looked like a god, but Evander Holyfield was taking steroids and loads of them. Everybody's got their suspicions about Mike Tyson.
Ron
He's
Lyle.
another
Ron
one.
Lyle, had it.
Yeah. So I mean, these guys, Anthony Joshua looks like a throwback to that. But you're sitting there going like, right, well, you've not got the gas tank because that's what makes me think that he's maybe, we all know that everybody thinks that he's on some sort of growth hormone or whatever, which may be the case, but the fact that he's not taking something to, like an EPO or something, something to, actually be able to run a body that size makes me question whether he is just naturally a big boy. But I think that he's got to lose some of that muscle. It's killing him. His gas tank for
Yeah.
me is his biggest flaw. He looks so he can't recover. In that 1 minute he's got between rounds, he can't recover, and as soon as he has to move, you just see him struggling for breath again.
Well, I think it's one of those things that it's very hard to cut muscle mass. And also, you know, it's very hard to lose it. And he worked against Parker having that muscle mass. He worked against Takama, smaller guys. So I'm going back to the point that he's never going to be a mover. He's never going to be a Tyson Fury. So for him, it's more about finding the game plan where he doesn't have to move, where he pushes guys to ropes, where he makes them circle around him. Having that jab to keep guys off him.
It's bizarre because he's very good friends with Vladimir Klitschko, and what Manny Stewart did with Vlad is 1-2 grab, and that's all Anthony Joshua had to do the other night. There was 1-2 grab, 1-2. Just tie Ruiz up. Don't let Ruiz get any of his work off. You're the bigger man. You've got, as you say, a 20 centimeters reach on Ruiz. Keep him on the end there, and as soon as he starts working his way in, tie him up. It might not be pretty, and it might not, put bums on seats, but that's how you win. If he'd have did that the other night, he would have left it with all his belts.
Well, he's a better boxer than he is a puncher, as people have said before. So I think he sort of, he might have to adopt a boring style to become effective yet again. But yeah, it's just, as you said, it's just very hard to address everything in one camp, and whether it's losing muscle mass or developing a game plan. Ultimately, if he wants to have any sort of success going forward, he just has to beat Andy Ruiz Jr. Because if he can't beat Andy Ruiz Jr., then what hope are you going to have against Ortiz or Dillian White or a lot of these other guys that have improved? I mean, at least Dillian White's improved a lot since they fight. Dillian White knows how to hurt Joshua. He knows to hit him in the body. So, yeah, it's just one of those things that you have to get over Andy Ruiz Jr., even with the attributes he currently has, because otherwise we're talking about a guy who is probably a bit of a fraud, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and I, as you touched on with Dillian White, he knows how to hurt Joshua, and Dillian White's improvement over the last 2 years has been superb, and Anthony Joshua looks very fragile. Well, I wouldn't say fragile. He looks at his weakest when he's actually trying to finish you off. We all know that he's a great finisher, but what got him caught the other night here is when he was in trying to finish, he didn't bother, keep protecting himself, and left himself wide open to a shot in the temple, which pretty much scattered his brain for the next 4 rounds. He never recovered for it. He just looked totally bewildered after that punch landed, and that was for Andy Ruiz, who's not known as a puncher. Could you imagine Deontay Wilder hitting him?
Yeah, that wouldn't last 3 rounds if Wilder fought that Joshua from last night.
Yeah, but like most people, I was buzzing for Andy Ruiz, but there was also a massive part of me that was taking great pride and excitement at the fact that Eddie Hearn has just been burned. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels like this, but what does this loss mean for Eddie Hearn and his DAZN deal?
Well, I don't think he would have got the DAZN deal unless he had Joshua heavyweight, a potential superstar in the division or in boxing in general, arguably in top 3 names in boxing in terms of commercial value. So I think it might mean, unless Eddie Hearn can sign more US fighters in the short term, that more of the promotional kind of impetus will move towards Golden Boy, GGG Promotions, all the other partners that are involved with DAZN as it currently is, because otherwise, what's that 1 billion, that alleged 1 billion war chest? Who are you going to pay with that? I mean, you can't pay Gary Russell Jr. and Devin Haney and, Callum Smith and others the likes. You can't spend that kind of money on these guys. So he either needs to get signing or then he needs to do something. He might have to start bringing, guys like Dillian White into fights against, I don't really know who, but the tricky part is he doesn't really, the ace in his pack has been folded, so a joker's popped out. So in many ways, Eddie Hearn doesn't have really any leverage in the US market. There's no single fight he has on his books that's known by the casual US boxing fan.
Yeah, well, this is why I think with Hearn and AJ both coming out and said that the rematch is going to be in the UK. I think I would kind of hold my horses on that one, because DAZN were the ones that put on that show. DAZN were the ones that overpaid Anthony Joshua. DAZNs are the ones that's giving Eddie Hearn his money to put on shows, and I don't think that they would take lightly to the rematch been over in London, which means it would be shown in the US in the afternoons, late afternoon. I don't think that DAZN, if their relationship is going anywhere going forward, I don't think that DAZN will be putting up with that from Eddie. But just on that as well, what has Sky Sports got to be thinking? Because Eddie Hearn is kind of like this husband that's ran away with a younger, better looking girl, you know, and and then she's threw him out, and is he going to go crawling back to his wife, and will his wife take him back?
Well, I think Sky Sports are already moving towards, World Boxing Super Series, building stuff here, regardless of Hearn. I think their contract's up next year anyway, so that's all up for discussion. I think with Sky Sports, it's sort of like Eddie Hearn has to make this choice in the Joshua rematch, which will be a hugely high pacing, hugely high grossing pay per view in the UK, or it will be a slap in the face for DAZN. So it's a lose-lose position for him, because the plan was always for Joshua to fight once in the US to make a name for himself in Madison Square Garden, come back to the UK, fight against Pulev in a pay-per-view, September time in Cardiff, and that was the plan. Now they have to make a decision, but actually Eddie Hearn doesn't make that decision, because surely if you're champion and you have a rematch clause, you probably have some say in where the rematch is going to be.
Well, you
He
would
can't.
think that, but I seen Anthony Joshua sitting at the table with Eddie Hearn, and his words were, I would imagine that we are going to get the rematch right away, but I'll need to go away and talk to the boss man and see what he's saying first. And I remember I was sitting thinking to myself, what the fuck kind of thing? He works for you. You don't work for him. If you're wanting that rematch, you tell him right there and then you want that rematch. So I don't know what the deal with Eddie Hearn and AJ is, and I don't know how much power AJ actually has over his career.
Well, it's AJ Boxing Promotions in collaboration with Matchroom Boxing, if I'm understood correctly. And the man that has the power around Joshua is Freddie Cunningham more than anybody else, to be honest. But we have to remember that Al Heyman is an extremely shrewd operator, as we have seen hundreds of times. I think this is the moment where Al Heyman can bury Joshua and Eddie Hearn, the US competition, by either scattering the belts or just finding a way to get out of that rematch clause, and then just finding a way for Ruiz to fight somebody else. So as I've said earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if the rematch didn't happen. Don't be surprised if the rematch gets scheduled and then Ruiz has a late injury.
Yeah, yeah.
That could be that's just a classic sabotaging tactic, or something else where they just wait off until all the belts, they drag along Joshua's career for a year with this rematch, and then they decide that actually Ruiz is unfit, and they vacate the belts, and then Ruiz comes back for $10 million fight against without a belt against Deontay Wilder as a thing, and then you have all these other guys vying for all the titles.
Yeah. And just to finish up, we will just talk about Deontay Wilder. He must be kicking himself that he's no fought a bit harder to get this AJ fight made. When DAZN offered that 100 million and they thought, no, we're going to get away and we're going to become the A side. Well, it's turning out that Andy Ruiz has actually made him the A side before, Deontay Wilder, you can't knock him, he's away signing up. I mean, that fight in the Ortiz, 2 fights, great fight. Tyson Fury, 2 fights apparently already signed and sealed. It's just waiting on it to be delivered. So you can't really argue with Deontay Wilder. But so even if Anthony Joshua gets his belts back, he is now the B side getting into that fight. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Anthony Joshua would be the B side, because I think Wilder's probably, he's now I'd probably say he's the second or third biggest name in boxing. He is arguably the best heavyweight in the world. I mean, well, he is the best heavyweight in the world because Tyson Fury doesn't hold the belts.
Yeah.
Despite what people think about the result, Wilder holds the WBC belts. Wilder has the best record of all the heavyweights. Wilder's this, if anything, has improved Wilder's profile. So Wilder knocking out Brazil was in a week, in the first round cold, and the next thing you know, Joshua's been battered in 7 rounds by a fat-looking Mexican guy. So this is exactly what Wilder wants, and I think people often say that point that he's kicking himself for the 50 million, but if anything, DAZN will pay more money for Wilder to come on their channel now, or Showtime or others, because he's the biggest name in the heavyweight division. So he might not make that money on one fight, but what he will do is he'll probably make it over 3-4 fights, and if he keeps on winning, his value will just go up and up and up.
Oh, I can just see Showtime. Is it Steven Espinoza? Is it?
Yeah, Steven Espinoza.
Yeah, I can just see Steven Espinoza now praying to God that Wilder comes through his next couple of fights with his belt, praying that Andy Ruiz comes through his rematch with Joshua, and they can get Wilder versus Andy Ruiz on Cinco de Mayo in Vegas. And that fight would probably match anything. If that happened, then so that would mean Wilder would need to beat Ortiz again and probably beat or draw with Fury, and Andy Ruiz would need to beat AJ again or at least get a draw to keep his titles. They get that in Vegas. I think that fight is probably just gone today as well, if not better in the box office as what AJ Wilder would have done. So if that does happen, have we really lost out in that much?
Yeah, and again, back to my point, Al Heyman controls everything. So if don't be surprised if instead of after Ortiz fight, if what happens is, there's Wilder against Ruiz, somehow was at least a couple of the belts or one of the belts in a unification fight on Cinco de Mayo, because that makes more sense to me. There's no real reason for Andy Ruiz to keep 3 belts, is there? If the money's there, life-changing money for him to fight against Wilder, if it means not fighting against AJ again, maybe having a very soft touch, or maybe not fighting anybody and then coming back to be splattered by Wilder on Cinco de Mayo, it makes sense for everybody involved in terms of the television networks, Al Heyman and everyone else.
Yeah, and you just know that the Mexicans will be quite willing to pay their $90 to $100 pay-per-views, in their hundreds of thousands, maybe even their millions. That's, because, you think about it, if he's come through the 2 fights with Anthony Joshua and still holding all the world titles, and then he's going to fight Deontay Wilder, who is a killer, he's black, and he's American, that kind of brings in all the demographics all together for a massive, it's got ingredients there for a, I don't know if you class it as high as a super fight, but it would be just a tier below that.
And you have a great sort of narrative there. You have a great sort of good versus evil by Andy Ruiz being a nice guy, Wilder being the guy. I think it's important for whoever Andy Ruiz fights next, or if he doesn't fight, that he keeps on impressing. Because if he can keep on impressing, that will even make it look even, more exciting than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely.
They might even chuck in a Trevor Bryant in there against Andy Ruiz and let him knock out Trevor Bryant, who looks great on the scales.
I actually fought Klawacki in New York. Bring out all them poles. Have Andy Ruiz in there. That would be a bit of a firefight, and then move him on. I think Ruiz is better fundamentally than what Klawacki is. I don't actually really rate him, and that would set him up for a fight in Vegas with Wilder, and that would keep. I think Klawacki, I'm sure he fights with PBC as well.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, so again, that keeps Al Heyman making an in-house fight. So as we stand right now, Al Heyman holds the heavyweight division.
He does, and you can always freeze out. Look, you can continue freezing out Tyson Fury. There's no real reason to fight it. Let him fight. The same goes for Dillian White, up until a point. Joshua, there's no real reason for governing body to enforce any mandatory. So it will be interesting to see in the next rankings what actually happens to Joshua for the governing bodies, because he might have to have a couple of fights just to come back
Yeah.
and force a mandatory.
Yep. And just to finish up, this will be it. We'll finish it after this. But I mean, I've always says that Fury AJ doesn't happen. It never happens. You know, they're just too far apart on everything. You know, but does AJ Does AJ being locked out and the prospect that AJ being locked out and the prospect that Fury being locked out, does that then throw it to the gear as then they need each other? You
Yeah,
know,
possibly.
if the
I mean,
PBC are going to lock the
again,
both of them
AJ is
out.
all tied down to a TV network, so he could fight on the ESPN, and that would be a nice fight for Fury. And I think it's a fight that Fury would really fancy at the moment.
Yeah. It was just, I mean, for me, you're trying to find the positives for, like, you know, British boxing out of this, because this could be great for American boxing, but this could leave British boxing now hitting a bit of a lull. So you're looking for the next super fight over here, and it doesn't get any bigger than that. And
No, but
and
that fight has lost its shine as well a bit.
yeah, well, I think all of them really have, though. As I said, AJ has lost that aura now, and even if he beats Andy Ruiz in the rematch, there is no one fighter in the world that's not going to want that fight. And I think that you'll see, even if he does beat Andy Ruiz, we're going to see AJ in a lot harder fights, because people are going to go in there thinking that they've got a chance. All you need to do is stand up to what he's throwing at you and throw back. You know, if you make him work, he's going to gas out, and then you can really have your way with him.
Well, that's it exactly. And as you said, it's the mental frailty as well. It's a bit like Mike Tyson against Buster Douglas, where he lost his aura after that. So that's for AJ the challenge, that he needs to. Not only does he have to win, but he has to come through a tough fight that people say actually he's got the heart. Because people remember what people say about Davis Hay, for example, or people said he didn't have a heart, and it took years for David Hay to prove to people he had heart, basically fight against Tony Bellew.
Yeah, definitely. But
Uh,
Riku, that's been
what
fantastic.
couple of things from me.
All right,
Um,
sorry.
it's funny. I was looking at the odds for Joshua's fights, prospective fights, which you can find on Odds Checker, and Joshua against Usyk at the moment, the odds that you're talking about. So Joshua to win that fight, it's sort of 1.5 or 1-2, and Usyk to win is 6-4, which is quite tight given what's happened. Joshua is now the underdog against Tyson Fury. He's the underdog. He's still the favorite. Sorry, he's the underdog against Wilder. And against Andy Ruiz Jr., it's 1-3 for Joshua, 5-2 for Andy Ruiz Jr. So I was looking at these odds before fights, before the fight against Ruiz, and in the Usyk fight, we are talking 5 or 6-1 for Usyk. Against Joshua, against Tyson Fury, he was the favourite. Against Wilder, he was the favourite. But it's all sorts of flipped.
Yeah, well,
And
I mean, that kind of performance will do that. You know, bookies are watching the same fight as us, although sometimes you do question their odds. Bookies are watching the same fight as us, and I mean, William Hall have spent a fortune promoting and sponsoring Anthony Joshua, but they must be scratching their heads now and like praying to God that was just this one-off freak night, and hoping that the Anthony Joshua they fought the back jumps back at them, or they're going to be left with a bit of a damp squib.
yeah. Then just one other final thing. Rob Martin, aka the Mail, Brixton, absolute gentleman, great guy, sent us a question to say, were the masses truly deceived by Hearn, or were us fans just living in the hope that he would be all we wanted to see in terms of Joshua? So were the masses deceived by Hearn, or were us fans living in the hope that he would be all we wanted to see?
I think everybody has been deceived by Hearn, at least a little bit. If not, I mean, you've always had your hardcore fans that spot things in Anthony Joshua's make up that go, oh, there's a flaw, there's a flaw. The other night there, I don't think that any has ever predicted that there were that many or that bad. It kind of exposed them. But I think Eddie Hearn, we've kind of watched AJ learning on the job and going as he's going, and Eddie Hearn sold, you can't really knock how he sold Anthony Joshua, and you can only hear something so many times before it starts taking root in your mind. So I think it's a bit of both, I think that we were all willing to jump on, and see this guy, but and just kind of make excuses for the flaws, and some fundamental, like flaws that he has there, massive fundamental flaws, just basic things like when he can't really protect himself,
Yeah.
but it is a hard one because Eddie Hearn, as I said, doing his job with Anthony Joshua, he's just bombarded us with hype, bombarded us non-stop for years now. And I think that a lot of people have actually got to the point they've actually went that far the other side. They're getting pissed off with it. Do you know what I mean?
He's a fantastic promoter, to be honest. In terms of what he's done with Joshua, that's been an incredible job. I think, do you think part of it as well has put a lot of pressure on Joshua to perform?
Yeah. And with Joshua being such a big draw and the pay-per-view superstar over here, the fighting twice a year is not helping him, as we discussed earlier on. I do feel for Joshua because watching that the other night, that looked like a different Anthony Joshua. It looked, and again, I'm stealing something that Vince Cummins says, but he summed it up perfectly. Mickey says it to Rocky in Rocky 3, you've become civilised, it's the worst thing that a fighter can do. And I think that fits in. It's starting to take root with AJ, that's something you can describe AJ as. He's starting to become civilised, he's not a killer anymore. He's a nice guy, you just have to see him after the fight.
Yeah. And I've always questioned how much of that is actually his personality, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I always had.
Cameras, or?
I always had until I seen it the other night. He had a right. He could have went in there and been a bit of an ass about it and says, the referee shouldn't have stopped it. Or, or he could have just stormed out the ring, or he could have been like any normal champion and just been devastated. He was actually quite gracious in defeat because I think he accepted that he was beat by a better man. Up until then, I've always thought it's been a bit of an act and it's been a PR thing, but up until then, after a fight, surely your emotions are raw, and that's when you'll get to see the real him, and either he just didn't care, or, he actually is quite a nice guy.
Well, it's funny because I think it was in the Costello and Barnes podcast where you had Frampton and David Hay then. They were sort of saying that you want to see, bad losers because you want to see that world to win. But more importantly, they were saying, I think it's Bonds that was even questioning this, that has he been so trained in terms of PR training and how to be that?
Yeah, so media trained.
That he didn't know what to say. And he basically read the same script whether he won or lost the fight. Like that was his sort of thing. That he just stuck to the script, to be gracious and congratulate Ruiz and, sort of say what a tough fight it was and call out Wilder, which made no real sense, to be honest, to anyone at all, because surely your belt's back.
Yeah, when he actually says about Wilder, I'd have preferred it if it was Wilder. I think everybody in the world was saying, thank God it wasn't, because, it would have ended a lot worse. It couldn't have got a lot worse, but I'm sure Wilder would have made that a hell of a lot worse. But, that is a great point, because he's been in the limelight for London 2012, and he's never really been back out to it. He actually came out of the Olympics a superstar. It was... He just came along at the perfect time, and he left the London Olympics an amateur superstar, which we don't get amateur superstars in this country. We're no big on amateur sports. We're all about professional. We're all about your premierships and top level sports. We we don't really take a lot of interest in amateurs, but Anthony Joshua kind of broke that. It was kind of like something you would see in America with like college football or something like that, you know. Anthony Joshua kind of broke that, and I seen him, you know, he was fighting in a Ricky Burns undercard in Glasgow, and the place was going wild for him, you know, and this is him when he, like, I think it was his third fight or something, you know. The place was going wild, he already had this superstar there. You know, it
Yeah,
was, and as you say, so he's obviously been getting the media training constantly, so that very well, you know, that could be the case. Maybe he's always on the job, you
I
know.
think he's when the camera's on. I think he's always on the job to some extent. But yeah, just to finalize, and I guess my answer to Rob's question about whether masses were deceived by a herd or will we just live in the hope that you know, that he will be all that we want to see. And I think Hearn was doing his job. It wasn't necessarily that Hearn deceived us, but I think to an extent, the media and everybody else wanted that clean cut sporting hero that the UK could be proud of. The rags to riches story, the guy that's turned his life around. And, there's a lot of stories which I'm sure many people have heard of Joshua, which have been kept out of the press. And, regardless of whether it's the messages that were sent to Eddie Chambers, but there's a lot of other stories. And I think it has been it's been such a kind of good thing for British boxing. So, everybody has benefited. The media, the journalists have been able to go to these big events. Boxing writers have been able to be kept in jobs where newspapers have otherwise cut staff. I think it has been on everybody's interest to build Joshua, whether it's the fans, whether it's the media and everybody else. So I think he was the kind of shining hope that we all want to see. And it sort of came crashing down last weekend. But, I don't take any pleasure in Joshua losing, and I don't think people should turn on him or, write him off and just say he's done now. Or, I wouldn't want to see negative stories about him in the press just based on one loss, because there's one thing British people love more than, building somebody as a champion. It's a good comeback story, as we've seen with Tyson Fury. And I think if Joshua can redeem himself, he'll be bigger than ever before.
Yeah, he definitely would, and I think what will be challenging is in the next few months is the British tabloids are the worst tabloids on the planet.
Yep.
Now, we've seen it with David Beckham. David Beckham went to France 98, the Golden Boy. He come home with people hanging effigies and burning effigies of David Beckham. We've seen it with Paul Gascoigne. They build them up and then they rip them down. And Anthony Joshua is going to have to be very careful about who's keeping in company and what he's getting up to, because this could be the point where tabloids want to start picking on him. He's got that loss. He's no invincible anymore. And he's no, so I mean, Tyson Fury is actually, he seems as if he's been media trained now. He's kind of taking a bit of the AJ humility.
Yeah.
Things rubbed off on him, so there is somebody else there. He's fighting for mental health and he's doing all this stuff. He's got a cause. Anthony Joshua has to be very careful the next few months about all the press could turn against him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. He needs to be careful. He needs to be careful. And I think he just needs to concentrate on his boxing. So, there's been talk about some of his endorsement team deals being renegotiated if he loses and, other stuff. But I think he just needs to take a step back from the commercial stuff and, keep being the the AJ that we know in terms of the media stuff, and just try and keep just focusing on boxing and just focus on getting the win.
Yeah, I think there was. So I know that we're just kind of talking on a wee bit here, but I was just when I was watching that the other night, and I thought a lot of AJ's behaviour was quite bizarre. And
Yeah, it was.
what was in my head was I actually hope that this lad's no starting to have like either a nervous breakdown or he's suffering for depression, or I hope it's not getting into something like that, because it was been I don't want to use the word eccentric, but everything seemed a wee bit off. It was a very bizarre night, not just the performance, how he was speaking after it, I don't know, something just didn't sit right, and I'm just hoping that, it's not something like that that's wrong with AJ, I hope he's not going down like a dark path.
Well, there's a lot of talk, and a lot of people have mentioned this, including Wilder. He employed a psychologist for this camp, which is the first time he's done so. So you don't really know what the reasons are behind that, whether it's, sports psychologist or whether it's anxiety or something else. But just as a human being, it takes a toll on you constantly being the center of attention and, expectations. And even last week, just following him on Instagram and seeing what he was up to. So it seemed like he wasn't having a normal, going to the US, it wasn't his normal fight week where, you do the press conference on a Thursday and, you do the weigh-in on a Friday or Wednesday, you do the main event press conference, you do the weigh-in on a Friday and, you just sit isolated somewhere, whereas now he was constant commitments. And I think today or tomorrow he's got some Hugo Boss thing that he needs to go to. So all of this stuff maybe just getting a bit too much to him and too much for him. And again, he's the only person that has his own best interest at heart.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about the kind of money.
Matchroom and Freddie Cunningham and everybody else, he's the only guy that can really put an end to this. And, if it's best for him to, cut down on those commitments, even at the expense of some financial gain, he needs to do that, because ultimately he's been paid to box. If he's not a good boxer, no one's interested in him. And we're going to see who's going to be around him, who's going to be around him in the next fight, and, how many people ring him up. Because I remember that story that Sergio Martinez said when he beat, I think it was Chavez Jr., he had 300 missed calls and messages, and then he lost to, was it Cotto or someone? Which fight was it that ended his career?
Can't remember. I think it was Cotto, yeah.
Yeah, and he said he had one missed call. And I think we might see Joshua might have the same realization that, people build you up when you're doing well, and people want to be around success because, it makes them feel good about themselves. And what we'll see is, you'll see, and how he copes with that, that's going to be another big factor going into the next fight.
Yeah. But Riku, that's us. We were only supposed to be coming on for half an hour, and that's us. Went nearly an hour and 20 minutes, so we've done really well there. But thanks again for coming on. I know you're busy, and you're out the country and work, so I really appreciate you making the time to pop on.
A pleasure. I mean, this is such big news, or such an interesting time in boxing, that it's always interesting to chat about this. And yeah, as always, hope to hear people's views, whether they agree or disagree. So yeah,
man,
let us know.
So thanks everybody for joining us, and there won't be another podcast out this week. It will be next week, as I'm away sunning it up in Tenerife. But if you like the pod, leave a review. Even if you don't like it, still leave a review and subscribe. I've been Stephen Donnell. You've been joined on the line with Riku. Thanks very much, and catch you later, guys.